This story is about Yeon Madro. The girl is called the Emperor's Sword, and she used to serve as the personal knight of the current Emperor Richard. Even before he ascended the throne, she was already by his side. She was willing to do anything for her master, no matter what it took, even if it meant sacrificing herself. One day, the master began to hint at something and gradually prepared the assistant for marriage, thinking it would be better that way, for the groom in her case was of no consequence. Iona put her opinions and interests aside, listened to every word, and in the end, here the guy that Richard chose for her was none other than Duke Leroy Khan. Iona tried to see only good in him, not to get upset early and at a time when his prestigious family name was tarnished by scandal. He quickly extended his influence to a key strategic point. Naturally, the Duke feared her, as the girl was, it can be said, the eyes and ears of the Emperor. Not a few months passed, as nothing good came out of this relationship. From the moment they walked down the aisle together until now, Yeon hadn't felt like a real couple for a second. He seemed alien and not someone she could truly love. The Duke probably felt the same way. The only question left to answer is why he's here, because obviously they're not meant for each other. The girl will never believe the guy did it willingly. There's a catch and she can't wait to find out the truth. According to him, there is nothing strange here. Allegedly in his place would do so anyone who considers himself a real man. Maybe that's what any other man would do, but in this case, it's a little different and Yeon feels it. In the battle, the girl was seriously wounded, and if there is no doctor here soon, she simply will not survive. The question arises, what is waiting for the guy and why he still has not called anyone? And meanwhile, when she asked to tell the truth one last time, he replied very strangely that he would only do so if she survived. First of all, this is some ambiguous answer. It is not clear how to respond to this. And secondly, the condition is absolutely impossible. The Duke already sees that the lady will not last long, and from his side says such a thing. Just unacceptable. The girl gets nervous, asks him a lot of questions, and the guy ignores and thinks that if she finds the strength to talk so much, it means she feels better than she thinks she does. If you look at the situation from one side, he is near, warms her with his hands, looks directly into her eyes, kind of supportive. But on the other hand, his words spoil the beautiful picture. From the looks of it all is not bad, but at the same time, something is not right here. In this situation, where she could die at any second, she really resents this calm look. The guy could have done so much more, but for some reason, helps only with words and nothing more. And suddenly, half an hour later, Yeon finds out that his men are coming soon. He called them beforehand, and it's unclear why he only told them now. She had already managed to hate him, thought that he didn't care about her, and the guy just didn't want to waste her energy on unnecessary conversations. Did everything silently. And now it was clear why he asked her to be patient and not to worry about anything. The girl looked at him differently, and in fact, she even felt a little ashamed. She mentally accused him and even began to hate him. But he just silently did as much as he could, and despite all his business, came to be with her, waiting for help. And then she wanted to ask him something. Leroy Khan did not refuse and promised that he would do his best. It turns out that even though she's going to get help soon, the girl has already resigned herself to her doom, and just in case, if she doesn't make it out alive, she'd really like to give him one last kiss. The guy is completely bewildered. His wife has never said or asked for something like that once during their marriage, because it turns out that she has been hiding her feelings and was only able to admit it now. She reasoned that if today was her last day, it would be wrong to die without giving her husband a proper kiss. Iona starts to look at his lips, her face reddening. It's awfully awkward, and he's not in a hurry to agree. Starts looking for excuses that they've already kissed at the ceremony, as if that's enough, and he doesn't know how to politely decline. At least it looks that way. Leroy Khan upsets her once again and asks her not to say what he's been afraid to hear from her since the first day of the relationship, which is something about feelings and love and all that stuff. The girl realizes that there is not much time left. She doesn't want to deceive herself. She presses closer to him and shows him that he understands everything correctly. She no longer asks something, hinted, asked him to close his eyes, and did what she really wanted to do. She touched his soft lips and deeply regretted not doing it sooner. There were goosebumps, and the thought that this was the most beautiful thing she had ever felt in her life. Even if the feeling is not mutual, Iana has had her way and is now ready to leave this world with peace of mind. The last thought she had time to consider was that perhaps, if it weren't for all these circumstances, they might well have made a good couple. After a second, she could no longer open her eyes, her body already motionless and no longer showing any signs of life. The Duke was so strongly convinced that it could not be, that he tried to the last to wake her up and make the girl regain consciousness. In this state, she lay for more than half an hour. It was clear. His hands went down, and just moments later there are some strange noises. Someone bangs their fist on the table. Jan opens her eyes, finds herself in an office, and sees a man in front of her. She doesn't know what's going on. She can't get her bearings, and she has to react to this angry man. He shouts across the room and resents how the girl dares to doze off in his presence. He has called her countless times before and perceives such behavior as absolute disrespect in his direction. And then the girl realizes that in front of her is her dead father, who is long gone. The period of life when she lived with him was a real hell, and it seems that everything is repeating itself. It looks like she went to heaven, to the world of the dead, and met her father, because there's no other way to explain it. There is no such thing as being able to come back to life after a clear death. Also, to meet dead relatives. She felt some sort of teleportation in reality. Now she has even more questions and things to do for the near future. The daughter and father have never hidden how they really feel about each other. No one tries to smile and pretend that they are happy about this meeting. Anyway, until the girl figures out what kind of world this is, what happened to her and why she's talking to a dead person, she's definitely not going to settle down. There's a possibility that she's just remembering some moments in her life before she dies, especially with those she'll soon see in heaven. But that's just a guess. Iana decided that until she got it sorted out, she would take everything around her as reality. And the first thing to do, of course, would be to point out her father in his place. The girl would not let herself be offended as she had done before. She very deftly grabbed him and began to squeeze him so hard that he would never want to raise his hand to her again. The man had often hurt her as a child, and now he would pay for it. The young daughter is grown up now. She has learned to assert her boundaries and discern which adults are worth respecting and which are not. Her father had always taken advantage of her, and now it was time to take responsibility for it. Jan had hated him all her life so much that she had never called him father. He was and will always be a stranger to her. All those classes she'd been taking in secret from him had paid off. Without them, she wouldn't even be able to defend herself against him. The girl has trained quite well in agility, ruthlessness in the right situations, and is madly thanking herself in the past for not missing a single class. It was as if she felt that fate would present her with difficult trials, and they would all begin in childhood. At first, it was embarrassing to treat her father this way, to be rude, to hit him, to humiliate him. But Jan remembered every situation, after which she had run crying to her room and realized that this was the least he deserved. She's willing to fight him all day long. It's like she's protecting her little self and fulfilling a childhood dream, as weird as that sounds. The father will never change, and differently, he doesn't understand differently and won't hear anything she wants to convey to him. At that moment, he dared to say a phrase that once again confirmed what a shameless person he was. Namely, "How can you treat me like this after all I did for you? How I loved you, supported you, and created an unforgettable childhood." Unforgettable childhood she may have had, but only in dreams. In real life, she was repulsed with humiliation and never once saw it in a calm state of mind. Iona doesn't even know whether to laugh or cry after such words. She has never met such an insolent person. Her father has ruined her life and pretends to be the best and most loving towards her. People like that only get worse with age. An unpleasant, dark energy emanated from him from the start. It's very frustrating to realize that all those childhood dreams, to be in his arms, to hear something nice, to feel protected by him, all of that will remain dreams for the rest of my life. Other children get it all automatically, from the first day of birth, and she has only heard about it in fairy tales and from stories about acquaintances. Jan was originally illegitimate. This is where all the troubles of her life began. When the girl began to show her talent, the Earl took her in. He wished to secure in advance the favor of the future emperor, but at the same time wished to avoid any connection which might become a burden to him. As an illegitimate child, she was considered a suitable gift to be sent to the crown prince. Thus, her fate was predetermined in advance. So her father began to hide her from prying eyes and brought her up in confinement. The girl did not see other people, was constantly alone and hated everything and everyone around her. In her life was nothing good, from the word at all. No one was going to make her a room. She slept on hay and never dreamed of taking even a cold shower. And about food, it's a separate torment, because of which the dislike of obese people was born. There were cases when she was abused, called for lunch, and immediately closed the door, so that the girl simply could not leave the room, was late to eat, and still remained hungry. In the end, she somehow miraculously managed to become the sword of the imperial palace only because of her monstrous height. And meanwhile, the girl noticed something strange. She didn't pay attention at first, but in front of her was a father she had never seen so young, and also a chandelier that had been changed to a fancy one last spring. She had never seen it before. You need to find out how old she is now, what time she's in, and what's going on around her. The sooner she finds out, the better. Iona is starting to get confused. She's confused, and she has to talk to a man who can't prove anything, who has only his own opinion and a terrible way of talking. She wouldn't know anything from him anyway. She had to go by her own senses. The girl starts to touch her head and notices a faint scar on her temple. It can't be, but the wound she received in the last battle, there's not a trace left of it. It means that the girl with a great probability got into the past. And so far, the answer to the first question appeared with itself. It is already not bad, but it is not worth to stop. Suddenly, someone opens the door with tremendous force. It almost breaks off, and it looks like the fun is just beginning. Ivan Modro and his sister, Niels Modro, they are the man's own son and daughter, who, as soon as they found out what was going on here, came to his defense. The son saw that his father was furious and was even afraid to ask how he could help him. The conflict was escalating, but Iona was no longer the naive, good girl she had been before. Words can't tell you how much she wants to get away from these people. But they won't let up, and she's in for a rough ride. The girl promised herself that these three would never see fear in her eyes again, and would soon find out what a strong core they had nurtured and created within her all this time. When the two men began to comfort her father, the girl laughed, much to their utter bewilderment. Ivan never thought the girl would act like this. He started to teach her that you can't treat your elders like this, but now it's not working. He is not the man to teach her how to behave and treat people in this life. She's been through so much she could teach every one of them. Now things will only work out to her advantage. She is stronger, smarter, more intelligent, more resilient, more cunning, and they realize it. What can we say when a father can no longer contain himself from becoming completely powerless against his own daughter, who he used to manipulate so easily? In case anyone had forgotten, she chose the right moment to remind them that she was an imperial knight, and if she ever saw anyone disrespect her again, she would regret it very much. This is a situation in which she is stronger than all of them put together. The so-called relatives understand this very well, and they have no choice but to ask meaningless questions. How can she rebel against the family that has fed and clothed her all her life? It sounded so funny that she smiled and didn't notice her brother raising his hand at her. He slapped her cheek and doesn't even realize? Some mistake. Just now, he's destroyed any chance of her ever forgiving them. And now, they're officially enemies, and will remain so forever. I'll take away everything you have. You'll be a nobody. You'll be a nobody. You'll be forgotten as nothing. And it'll all happen so fast that you won't even notice it. Niels thought her brother knew what he was saying, joined the conversation, and called Iona too arrogant. I wonder where they get so much confidence from, and if anyone has any idea who they have messed with, and what kind of beast they have nurtured and raised with their abusive attitudes. Come to think of it, about a year ago, the girl was shot in the leg with a hunting rifle. She remembers the situation very well, especially her brother's laughter behind her back, which he didn't even conceal. She has plans to avenge every such situation and put them in their place, though it's unlikely that anyone would put up with something like that. And then the situation becomes even more absurd. Ivan rarely allows anyone to say his name, especially those who are treated badly, and when the girl addressed him by his name, his face turned red at the same second, and it looked a bit funny, as if he was called or offended by an unpleasant word. The girl only saw his hand come up again, and before he did, she struck him herself. It was so strong that the guy flew a few meters away and didn't notice the moment it happened. He somehow lost gravity, and in a moment he was on the other side of the room. Father and Niels were so frightened that their eyes almost fell out. They lost the power of speech and even wanted to leave before it was too late. There was no telling what else would anger that crazy Jon. Ivan was even afraid to get up and look in her direction, his courage dissolving like sugar in hot tea. It's understandable that any guy would be humiliated to be in that situation, but the girl doesn't care. He deserved it a long time ago. She has been a very kind person all her life, trying not to refuse anyone, sometimes sacrificing her own comfort for others, worrying about how others feel. But in the case of these three people, all these qualities are automatically turned off for her. Not only did they never appreciate it, but they took advantage of her, ruined her life, and it was day after day, and would have been if she hadn't been lucky enough to become independent and move away. At first, the guy thought of silently walking away, accepting defeat. But when he noticed his missing front teeth, that was the last straw. His face was ruined, and he really wanted her to be without teeth too. He drew his sword very violently and started shouting across the room, and warned her that until he saw at least 2 wounds on her face, he wasn't going anywhere. It means the man doesn't fully realize what he's in for, and lost teeth aren't enough. Well, Jon will be happy to knock out a couple more. That's the bare minimum she can do to him now, and just in case. Warned where the address is to go to later to treat his neck and head, and maybe even something else. She took off her gloves in an incredibly elegant manner, tossed them in his direction, and said she was about to teach him to take responsibility for his words and think about consequences. And that's not all. The thing is, the relatives never took any interest in what she's been doing for the last few years, and they're going to regret it very much now. Iona is a brilliant swordswoman. It's hard to find a single worthy opponent for her in the capital, and when the guy found out about it, he wanted to fall through the ground. Now, empty words won't help him. He needs to prove his strength indeed, if he can at least make a move on her. The father realized that nothing good would come of this. He asked his daughter to stand behind him and close her eyes. It's so serious that father and son have decided to be on the same side. They will fight together against Iona, and again, they prove their weakness by doing so. These two just don't believe in each other. At the same time, the girl is absolutely calm. She is not worried. She does not even provoke any of them. She has dreamed of feeling this for a long time, and finally, this moment has come. That man thought it was too late to avoid conflict, but instead of apologizing or saying something for himself, He starts ordering Yeon to apologize and leave before it's too late, as if she's in danger here. He pressures her morally like he did the whole time she lived with him. Nothing has changed since then. He's still the same, sees her as a little girl who can't do anything without him. If anyone hasn't realized it yet, this girl explained that in this world, except for His Majesty the Emperor, no one has the right to order her around and order her life. Her father has become one of the last people she will obey, and it's very strange that he still hasn't realized it yet. He is just as much a stranger to her as any other man. Moreover, she treats even strangers better than she treats him, and he understands perfectly well the reason for it. And in the meantime, as soon as she managed to get back from that place, the girl started by getting rid of the maids who had been hired for the sake of spying. It wasn't difficult, but it took some time. She had personally spoken to each of them, and if, suddenly, the Count should ask the reason for the dismissal, had asked her to tell him that those he had sent had been imprudent and that their true intentions had been discovered. Everyone understood everything, ran to pack their things, and at that moment, the girl felt some relief. She finally felt that she was the only one in control of her life, and she liked it much better that way. After a while, when she had a chance to be alone, she realized that although she understood everything for herself, she had doubts whether it was a dream or reality, a punishment of the gods, or a mercy granted after all the injustice she had endured. The girl is so tired of fighting with difficulties that she no longer knows what is better, to go quietly into another world, or to constantly return, trying to prove something. But if you remember that she has a chance to see the Duke again, it's not so bad. For his sake, she is ready to fight anyone and return to this world countless times. That last kiss was something incredible. Yeon felt like she was in heaven and would probably regret it very much, having been shy and not fulfilling her dream. 2 days later, at the Imperial Knights headquarters, this is their headquarters, where they return after a hard day's work and spend their free time. Of course, this is where the girl plans to get to. He must be here somewhere, although it seems that at the sight of him, she will just faint. She remembers their last meeting in great detail, and it's very interesting to see if he remembers it. Although if she went back in time, they probably aren't even married yet and barely know each other. Ayana insists that it won't be difficult, but at the same time, she is afraid to do something rash so that she won't regret it later. It is important not to forget that in such situations, you need to listen to your heart. You need to think with your head only when it comes to work or something else. Relationships, it's completely different. There is no need to be afraid, doubt. If they are destined to be together, they will be together no matter what. No mistakes or wrong words will ruin anything. Everything seems so much more complicated and scary than it really will be, especially for one more kiss with this man. She'd give anything in the world. It would be a shame if, afraid to go home, she lost the only good thing she might have in her life anytime soon. Even if something goes wrong, it's better than not doing anything and regretting it even more. The girl has been convinced of this more than once and knows firsthand what it's like to remember the situation all her life and think that she could have done it differently, that you should have been a little more courageous. You should have thought about yourself, that fear and inaction lead to nothing, and most importantly, only those who do nothing are not mistaken. Meanwhile, she's already knocking on the door, at which point she gets a chill inside, goosebumps, and a feeling that it would have been easier to walk on by. Sylvia, the captain of the Knights, allowed her to enter the office and asked how she could help her. They rarely had girls come to them, so she was even a little surprised. The only reason she could be here was because she was injured or something serious had happened. The girl pretended that was the case, and that's why she would have to work in the office for a while, although in reality, it was probably just a cover to see the Duke more often. Sylvia starts saying she doesn't need any help. This isn't the place for her to work, and in general, she doesn't see how she can help with it. So now the girl has to find another reason to come here at least a few times a week and show up in a way that doesn't raise questions. They look at each other. They all have their own thoughts. Everyone is trying to make a profit. The main thing is to keep everyone happy. It turns out the captain didn't want to spend much time on this conversation as it was. She had to start hinting that she had a lot to do and openly wished her well as well. The conversation went nowhere. She promised only that she would try to find time another day, and right now she couldn't spare a minute for her. At the very last moment, Sylvia noticed several bruises on the girl's face. She immediately realized everything and promised that she would personally take care of the case and punish that person. Iona didn't want to tell about it, but if that was the case, she wouldn't give up on it. She did not tell who did it to her, only because it is not very pleasant to mention in the conversation the father, whose daughter she became not quite legally. She was constantly humiliated for it all her life, and she herself will never start talking about it first. And in general, everything about her family only stays in those deep heart wounds and never comes out of her mouth in situations like that. She is not the kind of person who is used to complaining about her problems. Once she is in the past, she will solve them on her own, which is exactly what she is doing. Sylvia's opinion is a little different, but there's no problem. If her father or brother is punished by anyone but her, she'll be happy about it. And then suddenly the other knights come back. They haven't seen her for a long time. They started asking a lot of questions and got scared when they saw the bruise on her face. It was insanely pleasant. The girl calmed them down and said that she had already decided everything. Such care was not given to her even by her father, although it was his direct duty, as it may sound, but these people are much more related to her than those called family. She even trusts them much more. If there is a choice of who to help in a difficult situation, the knights or someone from the family, it will definitely be the knights, although they do not know it, but it has been and will always be so. Meanwhile, the girl was already in some room, but she had come at a bad time, and the maid warned her that she would have to wait at least half an hour. The gentleman had just fallen asleep and would hardly be glad to be awakened by anyone. Either way, they didn't kick her out. Iona could stay here and stay as long as she wanted, or she could leave right now, and if she needed to, she would be notified as soon as the person woke up. She had so much respect for His Majesty that she decided to walk over, drop to her knees, and mentally thank him for being there all this time. He's the reason she is who she is, and she's afraid to imagine where she'd be under any other circumstances. Not even a few minutes had passed, His Majesty seemed to feel, and immediately woke up. He didn't even look in her direction, and immediately realized who was in his room. It was an amazing moment. It's like they have some kind of connection and something more than just experience and years of knowing each other. Of course, he didn't kick her out and gladly sacrifice sleep to find out how she was doing, and if there were any problems. Iona has known for a long time that this man understands her without words. All she has to do is look at him, and he reads and understands everything at once. Richard can't even imagine what she's got going on. If a girl came to him at such an inopportune time and disturbed his sleep, though he's glad to see her, very concerned about how much trouble and problems she might have had in such a long time. It seems like this conversation is going to be a long one. She's already insanely embarrassed and hoping she doesn't seem cocky and he doesn't think badly of her. And then the most interesting thing starts. Instead of going over the case, he starts behaving like never before. There are some touches. He goes into those boundaries which he himself created in the beginning, as if he is hinting about something. These gentle touches never happened. The girl was afraid to even think about it. She never saw him as her partner, and perceived only as a gentleman who gave her a chance to become independent. He's always been strict about it. As soon as there were girls in his environment from whom he notices any sympathy, he immediately removes such people from his environment. He was absolutely untouchable, sometimes even aggressive when it came to relationships. His assistants often hinted that it was time to think about it, and he usually fired them the same day. One day, there was a day when he warned Yeon once and for all. She must not even have a thought that there could be anything between them. She had sworn that it would be just like that, and indeed, so far, she had kept her promise. And now, she is even afraid to say an extra word, in case it is some kind of test or something similar. At the same time, even if the girl understood everything correctly, she will not be able to refuse. It turns out to be a vicious circle. She starts trying to change the subject in every way possible, pretending that everything is already fine, and she just went to visit him without any problem or cause, just like old times. You could see how much he didn't like it. She had ignored his touch, and now she was completely confused. The Emperor starts to turn away. His gaze immediately changes, and Ayana feels guilty, even though she doesn't know if she's making it up, and it's not what she sees. The Emperor was never like that. She led to one man and one rule, and it's already very different here. He didn't even ask her to come up. He did it himself. He didn't explain. He's offended. A little unfair, but I had to put up with it. At the very last moment, she decides to be honest with herself and says what she really came for. She needs to meet the Duke, to which the Emperor replies that she shouldn't be in a hurry, especially in such a way. Needs a makeover. Her scratches and bruises are all over her face. Even he can see that, even when he woke up and didn't look closely. Not the nicest words, but it's the truth she already understands. The important thing is that he reacted normally, especially after everything that just happened. They talked briefly. The girl said goodbye and wished him a good day, and began to think about how to put on makeup and whether it was worth it to look for the Duke today. Everything seems as if fate were distancing her from this meeting and telling her that now was not the time. Meanwhile, outside the garden of the imperial palace as usual, things don't go smoothly. Someone didn't sign some papers and things went completely off track. Duke was in the wrong place at the wrong time, had to talk about it and calm everyone down. The whole thing is that they were called and promised some guide, and in the end, they had to find out everything on their own and spend even more time on it than planned. As can be seen, only the Duke remains calm. He is used to such unexpected circumstances and sees nothing so surprising in it. It turns out that this was just the time when it was suggested to him to think about marriage. Everything was decided so suddenly that he felt awkward and afraid of making a mistake that would be impossible to correct later on. It was once called the greatest noble family, but no one could have imagined that the head of the house would be treated like this in the imperial palace. Historically, the House of Khan had good relations with the family of the neighboring Count Schmid. Since both houses had children born around the same time, they considered it fate and married each other, and that's how it all started. Because of this, his fiancée was more of a childhood friend than a mistress. But then, 7 years ago, an investigation on charges of conspiracy with a foreign state suddenly began in Count Schmid's home. Several incriminating documents and records were discovered, which led to their immediate punishment. And because of the engagement, the flames of suspicion engulfed their family as well. The imperial family assumed that the House of Khan also played a role in the plot and used the investigation as an excuse to seize lands and imprison all immediate family members. Then, without warning, his parents, the former Duke and Duchess, died in a tragic accident. No one in their family believed it was a mere coincidence, as everyone tried to show. In the end, even though no evidence of wrongdoing was found, the Khan's house fell apart. The guy lost his family, with whom he lived his whole happy life, made plans, and was the happiest person in the world, and the people who were supposed to be his family. He had to work very hard day and night to rebuild the family, which everyone pretended to have forgotten. The moment they regained their former glory came a so-called glad tidings disguised as a disaster. Yana Modrov, the girl known as the Crown Prince's faithful hound, paired with the imperial family's most famous hunting dog. It was obvious they wanted to put a leash on him under the pretense of unity, but she had a say in this marriage. In general, they knew something about each other before they met. It couldn't be otherwise, and it made the moment when they had to trust each other with their future a little easier, because there was no other option. And now that the girl knows what the future holds, it's much easier for her to make the first move, which she does. When she was very close, already saw him, the guy noticed someone's presence and immediately started looking around. He has very good hearing. That's why he reacted so quickly. It was hard not to notice that beautiful blonde hair that shimmered in the sun and reflected a lot of light. What was his surprise that she came to him? She admitted it at once, because it is customary for a guy to do it. He even prepared and thought up a speech. And it just sort of worked itself out. I didn't even have to be nervous. The meeting had already happened. He's too mixed, although she's about the same. Ayana realizes that she has created too awkward a situation, so she tries to smile to make things as comfortable as possible. At this rate, the ceremony could happen even faster than it did in the future, when it was the first time for her, too. As is customary, the girl introduces herself as a knight of the Imperial Order and asks if he has a spare moment, although she knows perfectly well that he is going to see His Majesty. The fellow promised to spare a few minutes for her, and confessed that he was very glad of the meeting, which had happened much sooner than it ought to have done. He was genuinely pleased that the lady had taken the initiative, had not waited for it from him, even though the time difference would have been small. It is very clear that they liked each other. No one is trying to avoid talking, but on the contrary, everything is very nice and calm. Sometimes Yan hides her eyes, thinking how to show herself better, but it is almost imperceptible. She is very smiling, and her main goal is to get a date. She wants them to have at least a little mutual sympathy, and before the ceremony, they could get to know each other better. It is necessary at least to become friends and begin to trust each other. It is too early to talk about feelings, although most likely they are already a little budding. She's a very pretty girl. He's one of the prettiest guys in the Empire. They have every chance of making a good couple, and maybe no one will even have to be forced to perform the ceremony. They'll want it for themselves. Everything was fine, but exactly until a co-worker intervened and took Duke away with him, the guy was confused and couldn't even explain anything. Either way, now they'll definitely have a reason to meet again, and at the very least, he should apologize for the situation. The girl still wouldn't stay silent, gave her last attention, and wished her a good day. The guy is a bit confused now, but she is not embarrassed. She is ready to try as long as he eventually behaves the same way and appreciates her contribution to the future relationship. For her, it's easy, understandable. She has seen the future, knows how it will end, but for him it's the first time, and such a reaction is quite normal. Eventually, she even managed to get a date a few days later. Now it's safe to go back and not distract him from his work. Duke pretended to be fine, but his mind was a mess, a lot of thoughts, all jumbled up, and a whole day's work ahead of him. In the meantime, Iona was already in the carriage, seeing that the Duke was alive and all was well. She was finally able to calm down, because that was the most important thing for her. She was not as worried about herself as she was about him, even though he was still looking at her warily. It was nothing to worry about. He was standing in front of a knight. Everyone would behave like that in his place. The girl is already pulling up to the Imperial Palace. She is greeted by a man she wouldn't really want to see, at least not right now. He's doing it as if on purpose so that the rest of the day is ruined. He didn't like the fact that she was wandering around the city uselessly, doing nothing useful, and had arrived so late that there was no time to do anything or help anyone else. There was nothing left but to ignore that empty sound and walk on by as if no one was here. Towards any other person, she would never do that, but with this one, she can behave as she likes. As soon as she starts to go up to the second floor, this man runs after her and is afraid that she will spread rumors not in his favor again. But if he only knew how much she doesn't care about him anymore, He'd never say that. She's got her hands full and doesn't have time to even look in his direction. She looks very calm against him, and he freaks out like a little kid who doesn't get enough attention. He doesn't have the patience to react to such behavior, but there is no other option. He can't do anything to her because he doesn't want to get a couple of extra black eyes and lose some teeth. She showed what she can do, and it was about time. These people are now afraid to lay a finger on her, let alone offer to test who is stronger. At some point, Yeon turns around and reminds us that she's an adult. She has her own personal affairs, and she doesn't have to tell anyone what she's going to do, with whom, and at what time. And if he goes after her any further, he'll regret it, and maybe he just won't be physically able to do it next time. He has no reason to ignore those words. She always takes responsibility for them and never says anything she isn't capable of doing. The man fell silent. He really wants to stop her commas. She at the same time is afraid to do so. He has never felt so powerless before. It was impossible to put into words how much she was sick of seeing that face before her. He had not even as a child paid as much attention to her as he did now. It's hard to even say if that's good or bad. Either way, it's not those times anymore, and he's done everything to make her think he's a stranger. In short, Yeon's father is only afraid of one thing. If someone sees his daughter with bruises and finds out who did it, he'll be in big trouble. Everyone knows how bad their relationship is, and he's the first suspect, especially since it wouldn't cost her anything to tell the truth and ruin his life like he did hers. He immediately changed, became kind, realized all the possible risks, and began to justify that she misunderstood everything. He loves her as usual, just a little overworked, and did not notice how he poured all the fatigue on her. It's the same thing. She doesn't even want to talk about it. She just wants to freeze him and make sure he never comes near her again. She'll never find where she wants to go, and she'll waste her time. She should learn to respect her time and not waste it on those who don't deserve it. The man's eyes change so quickly that she can't tell if he's angry, apologizing, or if she's just misreading him. To finally end this conversation, she answered very briefly and to the point. She is not going to help him and hide the truth from people, and also will try to make sure that justice in her life finally prevailed. Even now, he's not ashamed of anything. He just wants to save himself and doesn't think about how badly his daughter's reputation will be damaged if she starts protecting him and deceives the emperor. When she talks to him, she loses energy very quickly, has no energy left, and feels like she's being taken advantage of again. Her father is like a vampire, and it's a shame she's only realizing it now. He's even worse than any other stranger, and there's probably no one in this world who could screw up her life even more and wish even more bad things for her. In order not to waste time, she still ran away from her father and came to the office. A cup of delicious tea has already been made for her. She often turns to look out the window because there is a beautiful view, which is perfect to relax after such a hard and busy day. Within a couple of minutes, her father and brother are here. They didn't leave her alone. Moreover, they started to quarrel with each other. Her brother wants to take revenge on her, but her father stops her because he knows how it will end. She just watches silently, barely able to keep from laughing, even though the evening is ruined. It's not as bad as it could be. At least they're not touching her, and they're not as cocky as they were a few days ago. Tea is almost over, and they won't leave, and it's making her a bit tense. If she'd had that much attention when she was a child, she'd have been the happiest person in the world. And now I'd give anything not to see them for a few days. Their faces make me so sick I don't want to eat dinner. The girl is incredibly hungry and is even afraid to say a word about it, in case they want to have dinner together. And you can't even think of anything worse than that. It's too bad her words mean nothing to them yet, and it might be worth considering a guard to keep those two away from her. In the end, it is not clear what they want to achieve. The girl has long ago decided for herself how she feels about them, and they cannot change anything for sure. And then something interesting began. The father had a serious talk with his son and convinced him to apologize to make amends and to get the girl to start hearing them. No matter how hard the guy tries, it's nothing more than a hollow sound to her. She knows they have no sincerity in their souls and can't believe a word of it. As soon as she believes someone or tries to forgive, they'll take advantage of it and nothing good will come of it. It was at this point that Jan thought that they had nothing for nothing. If they deigned to apologize accordingly, they wanted to get something more in return. They obviously have a goal and they want to get it from it, except they don't know it's absolutely impossible. She's just interested in watching them try harder, apologize countless times. She'll pretend to treat them better and better, and in the end, see how very disappointed they'll be when they realize it's all a game and they're not getting anywhere. Her father used to like to play these games, pretending to reward her for order in the house, for good behavior and many other things, but in the end, locking her in a dark room and laughing at the naivety of his own daughter. This man did not appreciate the time when, even despite such terrible deeds, she appreciated him, loved him, and believed that someday to hear from him pleasant words at least on his birthday, not to mention any gifts or something serious. Ivan can't wait to hear that she forgave them, and when he saw the smile on her face, the guy couldn't help himself and wanted to hit her. He swung with all his might, and at the very last moment his father shouted. He forbade him to do it and warned him that he would be held accountable for it. They tried so hard to make things better, apologized, spent time on her, and he dared to ruin it so easily. It's getting to the point where they can fight amongst themselves, and she'll just stop being noticed. Jan even feels like a third wheel, and doesn't know if that's a good or bad thing. It's a pity that you can't tell them that they won't get anything. She doesn't want to see them, because no one will listen to her. You have to listen to all this. Play the game of who will win to manipulate them, although it's not interesting for a long time now. Clearly, this could go on into the night. She asked them to stop and said that Ivan had probably realized his mistake and wouldn't do it again. The guy didn't agree. He doesn't plan on giving up. And those words made the father angry, and even more so. The situation only sharpened, and with that, she only made it worse. It became impossible to be in their presence. The girl said goodbye and warned that if anyone made a single step in her direction, she would personally talk to the emperor to forbid them to appear in this territory. They don't understand, they don't hear her, but as soon as the word emperor was uttered, they all fell silent. A miracle happened, and finally she is alone in her room. Now she will not be disturbed. She can think about her problems, put all her thoughts in order, and sleep peacefully. Like Haydn said, a noble woman can't live like an abandoned child forever. She needs someone she can trust to function properly. You need someone reliable, with some references, preferably with experience. It will be very hard to find someone like that, and it will take time. She doesn't even have a helper to do it with. Once she relaxed a bit, some memories from the past began to slip in. Those hard times in her life still haunt her to this day. The girl remembers literally every day. All these punishments and ridicule were different every time, starting with something being thrown at her. It could even be food, and ending with being hit or insulted even without a reason. What to speak of a birthday? She just didn't have one. She doesn't even know the exact date, and she didn't get any presents. Very like that in such conditions, she spent most of her life. There was not a single friend, not a single person with whom the girl felt safe. Even the helpers told her father not existing bad deeds, for which then themselves and punished. They pretended to treat her well, but at the same time, they created problems out of nothing. The food that was prepared once a week was specially prepared to taste terrible and was impossible to look at. For all that, my father's acquaintances were sure that they were doing well. The man was trying to create a beautiful picture, behind which hid a harsh reality. Naturally, it was not possible to relax for long. The assistant came to her, although she did not call him and already wanted to rest. The man explained that he just wanted to ask if everything was all right, and since he was already here, she started a very important conversation. reminded him that a few years ago, when the Countess died, the maid was sent to a distant villa and wanted to know if she understood everything correctly. After all, it was a rumor, and it was very important to clarify everything. In the end, the girl asked to set up a private meeting, very curious as to what she needed it for, and literally the morning after, she was already in place. Assistant did not refuse. On the contrary, she was not averse to seeing and being useful to the mistress, whom they had seen a very long time ago. The lady woke up early, found clean clothes, did light makeup, even said you don't need any help. The girl was very responsible for the meeting and even prepared the right words. Meanwhile, the butler had already invited the guest into the study. She greeted and said it was an honor to see her again. She is very smiling. You can see she cares. She woke up early just like that. She even did her makeup, even though she hardly ever wore makeup before. Everything turned out to be somehow very exciting. The two of them hide their shyness, and only the girl knows what today's topic of conversation is. She even takes a cup of tea with a trembling hand. She doesn't know where to start, although she rehearsed her words all night and was sure that everything will turn out perfectly. When suddenly, she didn't stall, hint about something, ask useless questions just to start somewhere. She said straight out that she wanted to hire her as an assistant, who will not only have to run basic errands, but will also have to do something more important, arrange meetings, find out the right information, and so on. Fiona had been working as an ordinary maid all her life, had no hopes for any prospects, had no plans for promotion, had no aspirations in general, and then suddenly, there was such an offer. Of course she wants to agree, but she has no experience and is very scared to take on something new. She doesn't even know how to react to it and what to say, whether she agrees or categorically doesn't even want to talk about it. To make Fiona understand better why she had come to her, she had to tell her that the number of enemies had increased a lot in the time they had not seen each other, more than she could have imagined. Not everyone could cope with that. Accordingly, she will need someone's help, and the only person who can fit this role is Fiona. With strangers, the girl does not want to cooperate. She is afraid and does not think it is right. She promised that she would answer any question, give her all the details, teach her, and try not to burden her with a huge amount of work for the first while. Except that there is one condition that might be a problem. It is fundamental to Jan that the helper has no relationships in the next few years, that she has no plans to start a family, and all that goes with that. Fiona replied that there was no problem with that. She wasn't even in a relationship. She wasn't even planning on looking for anyone, and was completely immersed in her work. She wasn't interested in anything else, especially for good remuneration. She will not even think of losing her job, her personal life, and losing such a good opportunity. But at the same time, this is life, and everything can change completely unpredictably. It happens too. The assistant really wants the job and starts to get so nervous, as if she is not offered to cooperate, but instead is fired. Ayana says that she has nothing to worry about. She will try to make her as comfortable as possible. Everything will be fine. The main thing is not to be afraid and trust her. They should have mutual trust. After all, she is taking the same risks as she does. The girl gives guarantees that if everything works out, they will cooperate for a very long time. She has grandiose plans, and in general, they will be able to help each other quite well. Especially since Fiona already knows a lot of people. She's had a lot of colleagues discussing different rumors, which means they're perfect for each other to work together. Ayana truly believes that she has gone to the right person who will not let her down. She has no other options, and it's better than doing nothing at all. She can only rely on Fiona's conscience, and for now, that's all she can do. I wonder where this is going to go, if it's worth taking that risk. At least she was one of the kindest people she'd ever known. She secretly provided medical care, cooked more or less tasty food, ventilated her little room so there would be air, and treated her much better than everyone else. At first, she will be required to do her hair, make sure the cooks prepare food on time and bring it to the room, keep order, and do minor management tasks. She will make appointments, send letters to people on behalf of mistress, and if needed, she will recruit other helpers for the job. There is nothing difficult. The main thing is not to be afraid and gradually understand what is the essence of the work. The mistress will not be demanding, kind, and with this, not everyone is lucky. After they had already discussed the most important things, they started talking about life. Who was doing what problems they were having, what was new, and what were their plans for the future. The girl begins to catch herself thinking that she hasn't made such decisions for a long time, always leaned on her father, and for this reason alone feel very strange. She was constantly manipulated, brought up to be a convenient person, and all this was reflected in her adult life. Now, every time she has to make a difficult choice, she will think that she can't make a step without her father. It's very good that she is nourished to transcend those beliefs, looks very confident and makes decisions quickly. In the end, they had such a good talk that Fiona even wept. She didn't believe that fate would give her such a gift. She wouldn't be asked to do much. They promised to treat her with respect. She wouldn't just be a maid, but a personal assistant that was several levels higher and something she couldn't even dream of. As soon as Fiona arrived in the house, everyone pretended nothing had changed. Some didn't even notice her, but she feels protected because things aren't the same anymore. The first days she did her job perfectly, even did more than necessary and helped others. She wanted to fit in quickly and make sure that no one starts to treat her badly. This is normal, but at the same time, shows her self-evaluation. Although if you look at it from the other side, it's hard to feel comfortable in a new team and be alone against everyone. Her position is obvious and quite understandable. So far, Mistress is crazy about her work. She expected a lot less. It all turned out better than she could have imagined. All her clothes look perfect. Her shoes are clean, as if they had just come from the store. Her room is in such order, which was not originally there. Everything is shiny, shining. There is nothing to even pick on. She can't stop praising her. She sees her smile and has no doubt that it will always be like this. The two of them are so pleasant and comfortable working together that it's a shame they didn't think of this idea sooner. A complete harmony appeared. Even Jan herself started to look much better, unexpectedly. But Fiona is pretty good at coloring. It's like she worked as a makeup artist or practiced in her spare time. Her curls are so gorgeous you could have a wedding right away. Her makeup is amazing, perfect for a magazine cover, and her clothes are sheer as if they weren't real. At the same time, Fiona is also very happy. She has found her dream job. She doesn't even have to work hard. She is exceeding expectations and will receive a small bonus at the end of the month. And then they meet some woman. 2 assistants are beside her, and judging by their looks, it is immediately clear that no friendly conversation can be expected. They came to ask uncomfortable questions and raise their self-esteem. Looking at this person, it is immediately clear that it is impossible to communicate comfortably with him. Her look speaks for itself. She does not even want to be in the same room with her. The first thought that occurred to the girl at that moment was how people could have the desire and time to observe the lives of others and, moreover, to raise their self-esteem at someone else's expense. It's very low and ugly. It means your own life is as interesting as others, and maybe there's even a bit of envy involved. If Jan just ignores her, she immediately starts to resent her. She expected a different reaction and ended up embarrassing herself. It's outrageous to her that someone didn't hear her, that someone doesn't care about her opinion or doesn't care about her offensive words. The girl does not know how others have, but she immediately saw through this person and realized what he really is. There is a lot of dark, bad inside, and there is no point in wasting time on such a person. In the end, she managed to look back at her with such a look that the girl got scared and even started to move away. She lost and is angry with herself because of it. She has had so many experiences of others humiliating themselves, not standing up for their rights, crying, running away, and not one experience of anyone behaving the way Yeon did. She had too many life situations that taught her what she had demonstrated in this situation, and it just so happened that the Duke was watching from the sidelines. The guy looks at it and doesn't know whether to leave or not, whether to show his face to her or not. And then there's her father on the other side, who's pushing him about how bad she is, and how dare she behave like that with the first person she meets. He had some mixed feelings, and in the end, the Duke just didn't bother to embarrass her, walking back out to think things over. After he'd seen her by chance, he'd thought, why not meet again? Go on a date? Because he'd forgotten for a few days that he'd promised her anything at all. It was about time she showed up on the second floor, because if he hadn't seen her, he might have forgotten and had to justify why he hadn't thought of her sooner. He began to have pleasant memories and wondered why he had suggested a walk the day after they had seen each other. Habitually did his work and thought of nothing else, but they would probably see each other much more often now. He had a clear interest in her. Not just that, when he saw her on the second floor, he froze, as if he couldn't look away and shift his attention to something else. Some assistants started coming up to him, asking about business, and he realizes that in his head, all his thoughts are only about her. He can't really focus on something serious and doesn't even have enough words to maintain a dialogue with this person. Meanwhile, those two haven't split up. The girl's screams are heard throughout the house, and Yeon listens silently and doesn't even interrupt her. She's just not interested. She sees those angry eyes, hears that scream that she barely has the strength for, the redness of her face, and it makes her laugh. She could run away, say something hurtful, but that would only make that person angry, so you have to stay put and wait for her to calm down. In the end, it all went on for a very long time. Iana was tired so much that she had no choice but to turn around and go to her room. She didn't owe anyone anything, and especially she didn't have respect for the person she was talking to explain anything to them. The Duke even went out on purpose to listen to the conversation, but nothing came of it. No one was there anymore, and he became very upset. The assistant laughed a little at him and didn't even bother to hide it. The gentleman was thinking about the girl so much that he didn't even pay attention to it. You can predict that all this week, maybe more, he will be thinking about her and will not be able to be productive in his work, all of which will fall on the shoulders of the assistants, who can barely keep up with everything. Even now, they talk to him and he doesn't hear it. He looks nowhere and doesn't pay attention to it. This hasn't happened since a very important investor came to visit him, but that was more than 5 years ago. Nothing else and nothing else could interest him as much as it did the Yeon he had seen only once in his life. And the next day came. He had already sent a letter inviting her to lunch. The girl received it, was happy, but pretended that there was nothing wrong with it, and she had just found time to meet him out of politeness. As usual, the girl looks just great. She is completely confident, but at the same time tries not to show shyness. She doesn't want the Duke to immediately recognize the sympathy on her part and be sure that he can get her very easily. Everything should be right. He, as a guy, should take the initiative, somehow bother and do something to show his intentions.